Eagle 6 in the track.
Roger.
Viper 1 bombs away. One's going to climb high above 20. You're south.
Eagle 6 radar contact. Eagle 6 is visual.
And it goes left.
Hello and welcome back to the DCS SITREP, the news show on all things DCS world. I'm your host, Prickly Hedgehog. There was a massive patch this week from Eagle Dynamics. We're going to take a dive and break down some of the components of that, and what it all means for DCS World, which is the premier combat flight simulator for the home PC. The Eagle Dynamics team introduced changes across the board, especially in core engine areas, I noticed, but the raft of fixes and updates also extended to, no surprise, aircraft, missions, maps, and campaigns, among other things. We're going to begin with performance, which I think is well worth a look at. We'll begin with some of those core engine changes referenced recently regarding the removal of the single thread version of DCS for the multi-thread version. Now, ED advised that the bin folder now contains empty DCS or multi-threaded DCS and is duplicated in empty bin for backward compatibility with shortcuts and will be removed soon. This coincided with a reference to what they described as performance improvements were activated after profiling of certain missions and concepts of usage. Intense battles will be affected the most. Targets and shooting detection by AI units, as well as launchers line of sight routines, are revised. Major parts of the performance consuming code have been moved to a parallel thread. So again, a great example here, a good news once again of the highlights and benefits the team has achieved as we moved to support multi-threading in the game over the last year or so, which has generally benefited most players in the game. Not everybody, but generally has seen a major benefit in overall game performance, which is good news. Now, as part of this series of little updates, they also address some issues which came up, I think it was in a previous patch iteration around about the time they introduced the new GUI interface, that loading screen, and that was FPS drops and issues related to mouse activity and polling rate. That has been fixed. They also advised that RAM was not being released in some cases, so that issue has also been fixed. Now, while we talk about RAM, we mentioned a few weeks back that the team were working on terrain optimizations, tweaking interface with VRAM. In this patch, they described that they have new terrain scenery models, VRAM management system, which includes optimized VRAM usage, optimized streaming from storage disk, optimized CPU utilization in scenery models rendering. So they fixed a rear hang to or crash at first mission start in Afghanistan, Kola and Sinai due to unusual default season. They also fixed map layers, artifacts when zooming or panning in mission editor, F10 and MFDs.
Where the control reversal begins. On-speed LA is 19.2 units. The pedal shaker kicks in at 22.3, but at that point the airframe is bumping so badly you can hardly feel the shaker.
Now, the team went into detail about this VRAM optimization that we mentioned way back in March, actually, covering those broad topics of the VRAM usage, streaming from disk and CPU utilization. In simple terms, what they wanted to achieve was more saturation of the GPU cores, because most GPUs these days have a lot of cores to use, and to reduce, therefore, the scene compute times. Remember that the GPU is also going to pull a certain amount of data for allocated VRAM in anticipation of that need, but the actual dedicated VRAM being used may be smaller than that. It's just using portions of the allotted amount to render the scenes that it needs based on your settings. So for games like this, textures, shadows, and lighting effects tend to be among our most demanding processes in general, which, as you can imagine, are heavy features of detailed worlds within DCS World, especially as they start pumping up the fidelity of the maps, and also even some of our aircraft as well. So improvements to this process are inherently beneficial to scene rendering, obviously, notwithstanding bandwidth limitations though, and things like your bus width, data transfer speeds, and what resolution you're running the game in, etc., etc. And obviously VR is a whole new equation. Now, in conjunction with what we saw before though, in reference to performance consuming code being moved to a parallel thread on the CPU side, where complex calculations are occurring for flight models of aircraft and weapons, we should, in theory, again, the overarching theme here, see boosts in performance. Now, personally, in really unmeasured experiences this week, I feel there has definitely been improvement, especially in VR, which is definitely, as I said or hinted at going to be more taxing on your system. Now, the good news though, if Pimax is able to fully implement its proprietary software to replace OpenXR and the add-ons that are needed to basically make VR work or interface properly with games like DCS World, as well as its in-house upscaling, we may well have a truly plug-and-play headset in the future, which could be properly optimized for games like DCS World, which would alleviate some of the headaches in setting the VR headset up and getting those experiences that you see some players have. Furthermore, I'm very hopeful of performance improvements if the Pimax team can optimize that software for the DCS environment in particular. So stay tuned on that front, as I suspect this is going to be a huge bonus for Pimax VR users. For now, the new performance impressions in DCS World that I've had regarding the last patch are largely subjective. As I said, I haven't pushed the game through any number crunching benchmarks to validate them. Let me know if you're noticing a performance boost from this last patch update.
Now let's do it to the other side.
Now, since we're on the VR topic, ED did advise also that they are attempting to improve their spotting dot system. They adjusted the appearance of spotting dots in VR to be close to their previous state, they said. They are looking for feedback, they stated. So currently they're working on the advanced functionality for spotting dots rendering, which will depend on VR hardware type and its properties, which they hope to deliver in future patches to address differences in dot sizes between different VR devices and monitors. So that's why that feedback is kind of important. I was trying it recently, and the dots look pretty large. So they also fixed the forced cross-eye recovery tool and added options for quad view for VR in the VR settings menu. Although I mentioned the dots before, I generally don't use them. I also find in VR it's a little bit easier to spot or see some planes depending on locations and time of day. Although sometimes this is caused by ghosting and artifacts depending on your settings. You sort of see this movement across the sky or this anomaly, which you wouldn't see in real life unless the plane was, say, smoking really badly, which obviously some aircraft do, like the MiG-29 as an example, or some of the older jets like the F-4 Phantom. Now, they haven't, to my knowledge, generated fuselage flashes or light reflections you can get actually on aircraft, especially out in the midday sun, which can help you spot a maneuvering target. It is difficult in real life too, and scanning itself is an art form that requires more than just randomly looking. Either way though, with regards to all this VR discussion, I think ED teaming up with Pimax, as you probably have noticed, is a huge bonus, particularly for Pimax users, and I suspect that there will no doubt be trickle-down effect for other VR brand users as well. So good news really all around.
Alright, let's take it to the vertical.
Well, let's talk a little bit about AI, because as part of this patch, there was a lot of work to correct both air and ground-based AI issues, they said. The list is too extensive to go through line by line, as usual, but covers everything from armor thickness values adjustments to AI logic when engaging cruise missiles. Now, again, one related performance improvement which stuck out was uncontrolled AI units causing a major FPS drop in some situations. The situations themselves weren't listed, so hopefully this is less of an issue, or maybe a solved issue going forward, as ED continued to extract performance from the game's core engine, which, as you can tell from the first half of this video at least, has been a real theme here. Despite a lot of criticisms of bugs and ongoing fixes needed in DCS World, sometimes I like to take stock and think just actually how well the game engine works given its age, and we're plugging in modern tech like VR. So certainly in terms of visual experiences, I think the game is amazing. It actually stacks up really well in a genre, remember, that is notoriously resource hungry, as I mentioned a few weeks back. And we have a very, very demanding consumer base right now in the gaming world. Remember that Ubisoft released Star Wars Outlaws recently, which actually only sold around about 1 million units, surprisingly, a paltry amount given the popularity of that particular franchise and also the expectation of that particular game. Now, apparently the management of Ubisoft sort of blamed consumers for their ridiculously high expectations. Obviously, there are many other factors in play here, but I think it's an interesting one to look at a AAA game producer like that and how difficult the market is to satisfy right now. We do have very, very high expectations because some of the games being pumped out just look so amazing. The worlds, the environments, the physics, the speed at which some of these games can run. And those are often much more simple environments to recreate than the very large worlds that flight simulation games try to replicate. It's extremely demanding on our systems. So again, when you stack it up against that, I think DCS, at least visually, is doing really well, given again the age of the engine, given again the limitations and the hurdles that ED has to overcome. It's a simplification, of course, but I think depending on how you use the game, it is pretty darn fantastic. Sometimes I think criticism is good and well, but there's sometimes people are just a little rough, if you like, on aspects of what I think perhaps is within ED's control, and also the size of the studio. Remember too that to solve their problems, Microsoft and Asobo basically rewrote the code for Microsoft 2024 to overcome some of the hurdles that they had with their initial game engine, which included, as we said a few weeks ago, issues with getting better performance from multi-threading. What an interesting environment. All right, let's turn to maps right now. And again, all of this improvement is also good news for the work being done on the maps. We're going to start with the South Atlantic map by Razbam Simulations. They have redone the following airfields: Puerto Williams and Gobernador Gregorius. They've also refined the transition between the blocks. They've removed global normal artifacts from all towns and block areas. So great news for that map. It continues to shine. I still love that map, and coincides nicely with also the work going on in the Collar map by Orbix. They have added a couple of new airfields, Kusamo and Ivalo. They've also added, as advertised recently, the new summer ground textures. So they've added infrastructure around new airfields and various other places in Sweden, and they've added enhanced imagery around new airfields. They've updated and reworked Jokkmokk, replaced hangars at ES&J, adjusted colors at XLMV, UMOE, and ULAK. Now, a couple of other maps that got a lot of attention this last patch. We'll start with Syria by Ugra Media. So the scenes of 51 airfields have been improved. They have improved the scenes of 50 military bases as well. So 30 in Syria, 8 in Israel, 3 in Lebanon, which are UN bases, 2 in Turkey, and 7 in Cyprus. They added 61 new military bases, 24 in Syria, 17 in Israel, 5 in Jordan, and 15 in Lebanon. Helicopter pads have been added to 93 military bases. Helicopter pads have been added to standard hospitals, stadiums, and oil fields. New facilities have been added: a typical hospital, T-55, BTR-60, a gas torch, large flags, liveries for the A300, airfield radars, and a weather site. The territory of the central part of Israel has been added. Missing parts of the aeronautical charts have been added. Optimization for the models and also scenes have been optimized. Some things that have been fixed: they've increased the parking size for the F-4E aircraft at Segal Air Base, lighting in the hangar of the Incirlik Air Base, taxiways at Muwafaq Salti Air Base, the size of parking lots for the C-130 and the IL-76 aircraft at the Amman airfield has been increased. Change the Amman airfield icon in the mission editor. Part of the fence has been removed from runway 26 at Gazipaza airfield. Added an air traffic control tower at King Hussein Air College. Added an air traffic control tower at the King Abdullah II Air Base. Objects on Patriot launch pads at Muwafaq Salti Air Base have been removed. They've added runway and taxiway signs at Prince Hassan Air Base. TACAN upgraded to VORTAC at Prince Hassan Air Base. ILS identifier and frequency at Prince Hassan Air Base. Relief of the monument to the unknown soldier in Damascus. Relief sanctuary of Notre Dame du Lebanon in Beirut. Broken road and bridge near Latakia. Many visible joints of earth textures. A lot of minor flaws in the relief map, and the size of parking lots have been increased in a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 airfields there. I won't go through all of those, but these range from King Abdullah II through to Aleppo. So good stuff there. Great map, of course. Fantastic map from Ugra Media. They do a really great job, and that is definitely one of the more popular maps in the game. Well worth picking up if you don't have it. Speaking of also great maps, all of these ones that I've mentioned are some of my favorite maps too, by the way. Kola, South Atlantic, Syria, and Sinai. So Sinai now from Onward Tech. They have fixed a large number of air bases here. Bilbais, they have fixed the wrong ILS frequency. Bir Hassana, they fixed the levels of detail for the mound model. Burj Al Arab fixed missing ILS and wrong name. Hatsaram, they fixed 28R missing parking way and taxiway. Fixed the F-16 hangars missing taxiways and moved too far to one side. Fixed hangars 145, 146, and 147 in the wrong direction there. Fixed hangars near 28L. Fixed runways 15 to 33 not modeled. Fixed runways 28L F-15 hangars wrongly modeled. Fixed runway 28L holding line placed too far forward. Fixed runway 28L holding zone not modeled, and runway 10L holding zone not modeled correctly. Fixed wrong ILS frequency at Hurghada. Moving to Inshas, they fixed runway 22 wrong ILS frequency. Now to Nevatim, they fixed the aircraft spawn in air. Fixed parking slots 8 to 22, which cannot accommodate large aircraft. Ramon Air Base, they added missing markings for taxiways and parking spots. Inaccurate taxiway A. Taxiway lines too thin. Taxiway slope was fixed. Wrong building at the upper heliport. At Ramon International Air Base, or airport, excuse me, fixed incorrect ground markings and the wrong ILS frequency and missing ILS. At Wadi Abu Rish, fixed the broken ILS, and they fixed broken surface near the Israel border. They fixed the coastline bug. They fixed surface bug, viaduct across the surface mesh. They've added beams for some viaducts in Egypt. They've fixed ILS icons locations in the mission editor. They've fixed random helipads in the middle of the desert below Mitzpe Ramon. And they've fixed SAM sites blocked by map objects. Good stuff there. Well, let's turn to aircraft. As is typical, most of the major aircraft got updates this round. Obviously, there are omissions to some aircraft from RASBAM, which we're still waiting for a resolution on, unfortunately, but we're going to have to wait and see how that pans out. For now, status quo. But we'll start with the Chinook, which was the center of attention, the long list of line items from Eagle Dynamics, which it is their aircraft, across the following broad categories. So 3D model fixes and additions, which included glass reflections on the MFDs, new pilot models for both first and third person views, crew gunners, including a ramp gunner, systems and avionics fixes, improvements and additions, including the ARC 164 radio has now been added. A lot of work on the visuals and displays of the MFDs, and support for force feedback joysticks, which was good news. Unsurprisingly, therefore, work continues on this highly versatile helicopter, so expect more to come from the ED team. They have also added a sling lesson, something of a bread and butter roll for the big chopper. Multi-point sling loading apparently will be added at a later date, but both types add an extra set of challenges to cargo delivery for those big items that won't fit in the back, or in the boot, or in the trunk, as they say here in the States. So stay tuned for more updates on the Chinook. Hopefully we'll see some sort of campaign in the not too distant future here as well. It needs one, but obviously some of these features need to be a little bit more complete, I think, before a campaign developer will tackle the process of building a campaign for it. Otherwise, I think there'd be some features that would be missing from the repertoire of the aircraft's capacity. So good news regardless. Great aircraft. I've spent very little time flying it, unfortunately, just because of other commitments, but I'm liking what I'm seeing, and I'm hoping to see more, as I said, improvements in that. Now, as you saw from a video from Wags this week, he showcased the new special settings to adjust the dead zone and gradient of the roll and pitch channel in the F-16's flight control system. Remember that the implementation of this is to better support self-centering sticks, which the F-16 in the real aircraft doesn't actually work that way. The only reason the stick moves at all in the real aircraft is to help pilots with sort of a sensory feedback. They initially didn't have any movement at all, and the pilots didn't like it, so they created just a little bit of movement so that they could get a sensory experience. The stick measures the input of pressure really, or force used on it to mimic the travel that the pilot wants. So this new feature is able to be adjusted for the for the self-centering sticks to suit tastes and for those trying to sweeten their spots, so to speak. So both the F-16 and the F-18 had various other changes, including radar shadows to the ground radar, again to mimic some clutter and realism of the radar's ability to actually track targets within certain regimes. Now, there was an extensive list of changes for the F4E from heat blur, as is expected of this brand new aircraft release, which is a phenomenal rendition of the famous Phantom II, and that's famous with a PH, if you know what I mean. So as a litmus test for pushing the boundaries of what ED's sim engine can accommodate, I think the Heat Blur team have knocked this aircraft out of the park and continues to hone the aircraft. The list of changes included a new mini campaign, Frog 7, improvements to Jester, weapon additions, engine sound improvements, art visual updates, a slew of input changes and adjustments, and updates to the in-game manual, among other things. Again, I'll refer you back to the changelog if you're looking for more specific things regarding that aircraft. Just too many things to go through. Now, having said that, I've been exploring Reflected Simulations' Mid-Killers campaign, which is an absolute gem. I highly recommend it if you're looking to learn how to fly the jet in a much more realistic fashion and get the best out of its performance than if you were to just sort of trial and error or experimentation and guesswork. It really is an interesting and fun challenge to fly. I can't wait to get back in the saddle of this and the F-14, which also seen improvements along with the Vegan from Heat Blur as well with this last patch, and lots of adjustments for the campaigns and things as well. So really, really fun stuff if you enjoy learning how to fly these aircraft in anger, as well as just getting the best out of some of the basic components of learning to work these jets. It's a lot of fun. Now, Argus injected a raft of changes into the Mirage, categorized as follows: radar updates, marker beacons, external lights, various systems, flight controls, and general line items. This is another remarkable aircraft. The team have done a great job on this, and it's enjoyable to see these ongoing adjustments as the aircraft matures in this sim environment. So great job, Argus. It's another aircraft I'd like to spend more time flying, but there's only so many hours in a day and one has to work. So sadly, although I didn't work much this week, I must say it was a rough week with illness, and you can probably hear it a little bit in my voice. So I apologize here if I'm cracking up a little bit. Now, as I said, this is but a highlight of a long list of line item changes in DCS World for aircraft. It also included work on the Avio jet, the MB339, the JF-17, and the Black Shark 3 now has raindrop effects on the glass cockpit, which is good news too. So that was always missing, and it always annoyed me, because it's one of my favorite helicopters. As with all major patches though, a large number of campaigns received associated fixes and updates. A couple got a lot of updates, like the Raven series campaign from Baltic Dragon, and also the UH-1 Worlds Apart by Low Level Heaven mission development. Those received, as I said, quite a lot of attention. Remember that in terms of missions coming up here, Baltic Dragon teamed up with Reflected Simulations. They have a new campaign ready for review now. It's been submitted to Eagle Dynamics. This is going to be their Kola Peninsula campaign. I think it's Arctic Thunder that they called it. So lots to look forward to there. And that's going to be a dual series. Remember, it features both the F-16 and the F-18. And you can sort of bounce between the two campaigns, if you like, or the two aircraft as you plow through the campaign. Really unique to campaign development. And these two, in reality are some of the best campaign producers for the game. They do a lot of ambassadorial work because they also reach out to real pilots, Rios and what have you. So we're talking, you'll hear these voices. You'll hear Tricker. You'll hear, obviously, Rain Waters. You will hear people like Vincent Aiello, who does the Fighter Pilot podcast, Ward Carroll, to name a few. And that is really, really fantastic for the game to have input from subject matter experts or former subject matter experts in their respective aircraft, because obviously some of these aircraft have retired. It's great to have a vast number of these people coming in and providing some of their expertise and support to embellish our flying experiences. I think that's great news. All right, so this has been a long video, a lot of stuff we've covered. I want to thank everyone once again. I apologize for last week's omission of a SITREP, although fortunately it was a small newsletter last week anyway, with the pending patch which came out on Monday. And obviously I was really sick and I'm still getting over sickness. So again, thanks for all the support. I'm going to spend some time looking at the work going on with Pimax and DCS. Loving the Pimax, really is fantastic, especially with this latest patch. Definitely I've seen, anecdotally at least, unscientifically, some improvements to the performance in VR and the game in general, which was a theme of this latest patch, and it's good news. So that'll do. Thanks again for all the support. Thanks for the likes. It helps the channel chug along. I really do appreciate it. And we'll see you next time on the DCS SITREP.